Renaissance Italy, the birthplace of genius, of Michelangelo's David, of Leonardo's notebooks, of grand cathedrals and endless art. But behind the frescoes and marble statues, oh my friend, there was something else brewing. And no, I don't mean a new opera. I mean sex. Weird, inventive, occasionally horrifying sex. You see, between 1300 and 1600, Italians managed to turn intimacy into a combination of theater, chemistry lab, and courtroom drama. If you think your love life is complicated, imagine being in a world where virginity could be bought in a bottle and confessionals doubled as dating apps. Now, before you picture every Renaissance Italian as a toga-wearing playboy, remember, this was also the land of strict Catholic morality, which meant that every single person was pretending to be holy while secretly doing things that would make even the Kama Sutra blush. And the best part, everyone knew. From gossiping neighbors to satirical poets who practically invented subtweets, Italy was buzzing with stories of bizarre desires. If there was one thing Renaissance Italy loved more than pasta, it was virgin brides. A woman's worth was measured by whether she walked to the altar untouched. Problem was, Italy was also full of passion, and let's just say people weren't always patient. Cue the rise of an entire underground industry, the virginity restoration trade. Apothecaries sold potions promising to restore purity. These were usually mixtures of herbs, blood, and whatever random ingredient the pharmacist had lying around. Did they work? Absolutely not. But did desperate families buy them? Oh yes, because if a bride was suspected of being used goods, her dowry value dropped faster than a crypto coin in 2022. And it didn't stop at potions. Midwives developed techniques to fake virginity on the wedding night, like sewing a little piece of animal bladder filled with chicken blood that would burst during consummation. Romantic, right? Nothing says true love than chicken blood in the sheets. Now here's the best part. Sometimes brides would get restored multiple times. Imagine being the husband, proudly thinking you're the first, when in reality your wife had been restored so often she basically had a loyalty card at the apothecary. Buy 9, get the 10th restoration free. And society? Oh, the gossip was brutal. Satirical pamphlets mocked brides who needed extra blessings, and rumors spread like wildfire. If 3 neighbors saw you walk into the apothecary too often, congratulations, you were trending in 16th century Florence. So yes, virginity in Renaissance Italy wasn't about innocence. It was about clever props, herbal scams, and a whole lot of pretending. Essentially, it was the Photoshop of the 1500s. Fake it till you make it.
You've heard of therapy, you've heard of sex work, but have you ever heard of therapy through sex work? Welcome to Renaissance Italy, where courtesans were more than just escorts. They were spiritual advisors, fashion icons, political influencers, and sometimes, believe it or not, actual therapists. Venice, the floating city of canals and masks, was the hotspot. The courtesans of Venice weren't just women for hire. They were educated, witty, and sometimes more powerful than noblemen. Think of them as the Kardashians of the lagoon, except instead of Instagram, they had poetry, music, and scandalous dinner parties. Men of all ranks, merchants, nobles, even priests, flocked to them not just for pleasure, but for advice. Feeling sad? Go to a courtesan. Having marital issues? A courtesan will heal you. Struggling with the meaning of life? Courtesan. In a way, they were the Renaissance version of both Tinder and BetterHelp wrapped into one expensive package. And expensive they were. Some of the high-class courtesans charged more for an evening than a sailor made in a year. Why? Because their clients weren't just paying for intimacy, they were paying for prestige. To be seen with a famous courtesan was a status symbol. Walk into a Venetian ball with one on your arm and suddenly you're the main character. But here's where it gets weird. Some doctors of the time actually believed that visiting courtesans was medically beneficial. There were theories about balancing the humors. Basically, that a man's health depended on his fluids staying in check. Too moody? Too pale? Clearly, you hadn't released enough. And who better to help restore balance than the city's finest courtesan? Imagine going to your modern-day doctor and he prescribes 2 courtesans twice a week, and if symptoms persist, increase dosage. Of course, society's reaction was double-faced. On one side, the church thundered against the sins of Venice. On the other, many clerics were secretly their best clients. Hypocrisy was practically a national sport. And poets? Oh, they immortalized courtesans in sonnets, turning them into celebrities. Veronica Franco, one of the most famous, wrote poetry that roasted her clients and still got away with it. She was Renaissance Italy's version of writing a viral tweet thread, except hers were about men who couldn't perform. So yes, in Renaissance Italy, courtesans weren't just there to warm your bed, they were there to fix your soul, boost your reputation, and sometimes prescribe you more sessions than any doctor ever would. Basically, they were therapists with better outfits. If you thought the Renaissance was all about art, beauty, and Michelangelo's David, think again, because alongside the paintings and sculptures came something far less glamorous: the public shame rituals. Picture this: a husband catches his wife cheating, or sometimes just suspects it. Does he quietly handle it behind closed doors? Oh no, my friend, this is Italy. Everything is a performance. Instead, the guilty or accused party could be marched through the streets, stripped half naked, while a mob of neighbors laughed, jeered, and tossed rotten vegetables. Imagine getting canceled on Twitter, except it's in real life, you're actually half naked, and the whole town is trending your downfall.
One of the most infamous practices was called the cuckolds parade. If a man was publicly known to be cheated on, sometimes horns would literally be placed on his head, symbolizing his humiliation. The crowd would shout, the bells might even ring, and everyone from bakers to bishops joined in the mockery. It was like a live-action meme, and the poor guy was the punchline. Women weren't spared either. In some towns, adulterous wives were made to ride donkeys backward through the piazza, holding chickens or carrying bizarre props that symbolized their crime. The worse the scandal, the more ridiculous the props. You think a scarlet letter is harsh? Try riding a donkey in front of your in-laws with feathers glued to your hair while children chant rhymes about your bedroom life. And because Renaissance Italians never missed a chance to commercialize chaos, local printers sold woodcut pamphlets of these humiliations. That's right, your shame could be immortalized and sold like trading cards. Buy one, hang it in your tavern, and boom, entertainment for years. Imagine your worst breakup going viral, but instead of TikTok, it's etched in ink and distributed at every wine shop in town. Now here's the kicker. Sometimes these shame rituals weren't even punishments. They were entertainment. Crowds showed up for the drama. They loved the gossip, the spectacle, the chance to point and laugh. It was Renaissance reality TV, except unscripted, raw, and with a much higher risk of catching something from the chickens. The church, of course, acted horrified in public, condemning the vulgar practices of the mob. But behind closed doors, many priests and monks secretly enjoyed the shows. After all, nothing sells a sermon like a bit of juicy local scandal to spice up Sunday Mass. So while Michelangelo was carving out perfection in marble, the streets of Florence and Venice were hosting humiliation parades that made Jerry Springer look classy. The Renaissance wasn't just about rebirth, it was also about roasting your neighbors in the most public, humiliating way possible. Renaissance medicine, where leeches, astrology, and a sprinkle of holy water could cure just about anything, or so they claimed. But when it came to sex, let's just say the doctors of 1500s Italy were basically running their own OnlyFans disguised as science. Take, for example, the belief that women suffered from a terrifying disease called suffocation of the womb. Doctors claimed that if a woman didn't have enough sex or the right kind of sex, her womb would literally wander around her body, choking her from the inside.
Yes, you heard that right. Apparently, your uterus had travel plans, and the only solution was, you guessed it, more action.
And who better to prescribe that cure than the physician himself? That's right, some Renaissance doctors actually treated patients personally. Imagine going to your GP for a cough and he tells you, well, clearly you need more intimate activity and I'd be happy to supervise. It was exploitation wrapped up in pseudoscience, and the men got away with it because, well, who was going to argue with someone wearing a fancy scholar's robe and quoting Aristotle? Then came the fertility cures. Struggling to conceive? The solution might be a potion made of crushed pearls, bull's testicles, or, if you're really unlucky, powdered mummified body parts imported from Egypt. Yes, Renaissance Italians were literally snorting the dead in hopes of making more babies. Add some wine, call it medicine, and boom, fertility smoothie. And don't even get me started on astrology. Doctors would consult the stars before deciding when a couple should have sex. Oh, sorry, Mars is in retrograde. You'll have to wait until next Thursday for conception night. Imagine planning your entire love life around what your doctor's horoscope said that morning. But perhaps the most bizarre cure involved masturbation, or as they politely called it, self-treatment. Some physicians insisted it was healthy. Others claimed it would cause blindness or madness, which meant you had a population oscillating between doctor's orders, go for it, and God will strike you down if you do it. Talk about mixed signals. And the church, of course, had opinions. Masturbation was a sin, adultery was a sin, sex for pleasure was a sin, but conveniently, expensive confession fees and church-endorsed remedies were not. Nothing says holy business like monetizing guilt. Meanwhile, regular folks weren't buying all of this. Tavern jokes and street songs mocked doctors who were too hands-on with their treatments. Some even published satire pamphlets featuring cartoons of physicians examining women a little too thoroughly. Basically, medieval meme culture was alive and thriving. So the next time you roll your eyes at modern wellness scams, detox teas, jade eggs, whatever Gwyneth Paltrow is selling, just remember, 500 years ago, Italians were drinking bull testicle smoothies and paying their doctors to flirt with astrology charts. Renaissance medicine wasn't just weird. It was horny, hypocritical, and highly profitable. If the Renaissance had a Las Vegas, it was Venice during Carnival. For weeks leading up to Lent, the entire city turned into one giant masked rave, minus the EDM, plus a whole lot of powdered wigs, satin capes, and very questionable moral choices. Picture this: nobles in velvet robes, courtesans in glittering masks, servants dressed as their masters, all hiding behind elaborate disguises. Because with a mask on, who's to say if you're a duke, a merchant, or just a guy who rented a costume? Social class blurred, reputations went on holiday, and the only rule was, there were no rules. And the activities? Oh boy. Behind closed doors, or sometimes not even behind doors, there were feasts where the wine flowed like water and the conversations turned into full-blown orgies. Contemporary diaries whisper about nobles sneaking into gondolas with strangers, courtesans staging elaborate masquerade performances, and priests who conveniently forgot their vows for the night. Masks were everything. They weren't just for anonymity, they were practically the 1500s version of incognito mode. The Bauta mask, covering the whole face, let you flirt, gamble, or commit scandal without being recognized. The Moretta mask, a small oval mask held by biting a button in your teeth, made women look mysterious and silent. Perfect for the fantasy, less perfect for dental hygiene. And then there were the after-parties. Imagine Venetian palaces lit by chandeliers, with courtyards echoing music and laughter, while behind silk curtains, the real business happened.
Carnival wasn't just a festival. It was the annual purge of lust, a socially sanctioned chaos where sex, money, and power all collided in a glorious mess. Of course, the church hated it. Priests thundered from pulpits about sin, warning that masked balls were gateways to damnation. But ironically, many clerics were spotted attending in disguise themselves. Nothing like condemning debauchery on Sunday while sneaking into a masked banquet on Saturday night. And for the common folk, Carnival was a chance to mock the elite. Satirical plays parodied bishops and dukes, crude songs about sexual escapades filled the streets, and scandalous woodcut pamphlets circulated faster than today's viral memes. Everyone knew that what happened during Carnival would echo and gossip long after the masks were put away. Travelers were both shocked and delighted. One French ambassador wrote that Venice was a city where vice walks hand in hand with virtue, both wearing masks. In other words, you came for the politics, you stayed for the scandal. So, what do Renaissance Italy's weirdest sexual practices tell us? That behind all the art, philosophy, and genius, people were still just people. Lusty, hypocritical, hilarious, and inventive in the most bizarre ways. From fertility smoothies made of bull parts, to doctors with way too much hands-on experience, to masked carnivals of chaos, sex was everywhere, hiding in plain sight. The Renaissance gave us Michelangelo's David and Botticelli's Venus, sure, but it also gave us wandering wombs, horny priests, and midnight gondola hookups. In other words, history wasn't just painted in oils and marble. Sometimes it was painted in blush, sweat, and a very awkward confession the next morning.